Welcome back to the Festival of Place, the Pineapples in association with the Design Council. As you know, this is a unique event where we bring together developers, designers and placemakers from across the built environment to share their work as they vie to win a coveted golden pineapple for place. This is the third and final session of the Place in Progress category. And to be considered a place in progress, the project will be partway through its development cycle with at least one phase completed. Our judges here this morning will be looking for a place that thrives, contributes to urban life and encourages people to dwell, live, work, connect, learn or play, or any combination of those things, of course. We have 6 places shortlisted on today's list. Each has been visited by at least one judge, so we benefit from their physical experience as well as from the presentations that we see here today. In this next phase of the judging, each team will have 10 minutes to present, followed by 10 minutes of questions from our judges. To keep it fair, I'm going to be keeping an eye on the stop clock and informing them when they have a minute to go. So don't forget that you can use those emojis down the bottom of the screen there. And if you've got a comment that you'd like to make, then use the question box to the side of the screen there. When our presenters are presenting, you might want to just click on the little arrows at the top of the screen to send the presentation full screen so you can see in a little bit more detail. We'll be meeting the judges in more detail after the first presentation when they share their questions with us. But just to introduce them to you, our judges are Pete Swift, Founding Director of Planet IE. He's got particular expertise in landscape planning and large-scale master plans and urban regeneration. We have also Maja Naumczyk, who's Community Partnership Officer at Falkirk Council. She's passionate about design, research, community empowerment and sustainability and innovation. So welcome to Maja. And also Phil Stallwood, Development Manager at CEG. He's an experienced development manager who specialises in landscape and complex mixed use. So welcome to all of our judges. We look forward to hearing from you. So the moment has arrived for our 5th presentation of the day, which is New Islington Manchester. It's a mixed-use project transforming New Islington from a once deprived area to one of the UK's most desirable and accessible mixed tenure communities. So I'd like to welcome Leanne Forshaw-Jones of House by Urban Splash, and we look forward to hearing from you. The stage is yours. Your 10 minutes starts.
Morning or good afternoon. Thank you for listening to this presentation, everybody. I hope you can see my screen now. Please shout up if you can't. I'm here representing House by Urban Splash, which is a modern house builder and a sister business to the probably better known Urban Splash business. Which was demerged in 2019 and became a partnership business with Circus House, the world's biggest house builder, and Homes England. One of the hero projects for the business and what I want to talk to you about today is New Islington, a significant regeneration project in Manchester, which has helped establish a brand new community on a patch of land that was 10, 15 years ago, even pretty run down, pretty disused and pretty poorly perceived. This image here is our... Yeah,
I think you might be trying to show us your slides, but we can't. We can just see your lovely face at the moment. So maybe...
That is not very good. Apologies. Let me just try that again. And let us just see if it works this time. Apologies, everybody. What a great start.
No worries.
Is that any better?
That's the one. Lovely.
There we go. Sorry about that. I will recompose myself. So this CGI, you can hopefully all now see, please shout up if you can't, is what New Islington will look like in 2023 when it is complete. It's a 20-year regeneration project, and we're really proud to say that so much of what you can see here is already delivered. And we are just now dealing with the final phases of homes and green space in this area here. But largely this park, this marina, all exists, all great, well-used spaces by a new community of people living here, as well as the original community who've stayed in New Islington and visitors to the area. It's a partnership-led development. It was one of the Millennium communities. We began work at New Islington in the early 2000s in partnership with all these various organisations, and we're now very much in the finishing stages. but it wasn't always like this. It's in its third iteration, really. New Islington in the mid-century, or even before that, Victorian times, was rows of beautiful old terraces, housed a lot of Manchester's Italian communities, a lot of the industrial communities. It was a kind of industrial suburb. By the 60s, it had become this sort of typical housing stock, and it just became really run down. It was segregated physically from Manchester city centre by the existence of a terribly designed retail park that didn't really serve the community in any way, and just created a barrier almost for the people living here, who really naturally geographically should have been connected and very well linked to Manchester city centre. It reached the point where it looked like this. It was sadly used as a backdrop for Shameless in the 2000s, which kind of said it all and epitomised it really. But it was just such a great shame, because you had this beautiful physical structure. It was a site flanked by 2 canals. You had a brilliant community of people living there who wanted to stay there and just wanted a bit of belief and a bit of investment and design to just help bring it to what they knew it could be. And that's where Urban Splash and various other partners, including the council, architects including Will Alsop and SHEDkm, stepped in to try and work out a way of transforming the area. Will Alsop was the original master planner, whose concept was to link the 2 canals. So on the western side of the site here, you have the Rochdale Canal, you have the Ashton Canal running parallel over here. And the idea was to create a marina and a basin, linking the 2 canals and building a community around it, not just houses, but supposed to be a way of stopping the mass exodus, stopping people leaving town and going to the suburbs, and giving them the housing they needed, be it apartments or family housing, the schools, the health centre, the green space, everything that this area had the potential to deliver, but just hadn't had the investment or the love to nurture it to that point. So this is the master plan. Just to give you some context, if you do know Manchester, Ancoats is over on this side of site, and then you've got the northern quarter on this side of the Great Ancoat Street main route. So it's a huge site, and it has now really re-established itself, especially in the context of Ancoats and the northern quarter being so well perceived, growing boho districts. New Islington's really been able to be a part of that movement and ride the crest of that wave. I'll flick through these slides quickly. One of the first things that we delivered at the site in partnership with Manchester City Council was the park. It was really imperative that this was green space led, and rather than just being dense housing, this area had places for people to just relax and enjoy Manchester. So Cottonfield Park was created about 10 years ago, still managed by Urban Splash and by the city. The moorings were revamped there a couple of years ago, so there's permanent houseboats, temporary narrowboats sailing through, and it's just helped give a bit of life to the centre of the site, and it now looks like that. We then reconsulted the original community, who, as I say, were passionate about staying in New Islington. So we worked with a number of architects, Fat, Demets, to create these new houses for those existing residents. They were absolutely involved in every element of the design process, and they were given their homes first before any of the other development started. So it was park, marina, and then houses for existing residents. In 2011, we were part of the bid to the Department for Education to bring a school here. It was a really exciting time to have been involved in writing that bid, something I'd never personally done before, something like the team had never done before. We canvassed locally, we canvassed local businesses to see if there was an appetite for urban schooling at primary school level. We believed that was one of the biggest things that would keep families in Manchester city centre. We were successful. The school was in porter cabins for the first 2 years, and then the permanent structure was erected, I think, in 2015, and it's now an Ofsted outstanding school with hundreds of kids there. The council also delivered a medical centre on the eastern end of site, which has been going now for about 10 years, providing another awesome amenity for people living there. And then in 2009 and 10 is when we started the residential development. So Chips, which was designed by Will Alsop, which is pictured there, was the first building to be completed, comprising 142 apartments. Many of them were available through Rent to Home Buy, which was the affordable product at the time. Again, just ensuring that this was attainable community and lots of different people could live there. There's also space on the ground floor in which a nursery now stands. We created some more workspace in one of the existing mill buildings on the site, which now looks like that. And then we moved on to House, which is perhaps the biggest contribution to New Islington, and it's basically an architect-led product. It's a take on the terraced house, designed by architect shedkm, who are wonderful and represented by Hazel on this session. And they came up with a template to allow customers to command the layout of their own home. It's then built in the House by Urban Splash factory to customer specifications before being delivered back to site. We've done a few rows of these now around New Islington. I think we've done a couple of hundred, the latest of which is Percy Street, pictured here. Used to look like that, real gritty piece of land on the eastern end of site. Within a year, we created homes, and it now looks like that. They're all now sold out and occupied. And we've got some great case studies which feature in the video version of this presentation that I have provided to two judges yesterday. So you can watch that if you wish to hear their views on now living there. We then this year added Mansion House, which is an apartment offering of House by Urban Splash. We thought it was important, having catered so well for the family housing side of the market, that we brought more apartments here. This is a super sustainable offering. It's again an off-site concept designed by shedkm. It uses panelised technology, so where the houses are volumetric and the stories of each houses are craned on top of each other, if you like. This is more of a flat pack concept, created using cross-laminated timber. Every piece of timber super sustainably sourced from Bilbao. Every piece of timber is stamped with a passport, and it has led to a really sustainable apartment offering dual aspect views over that lovely marina that I showed you before. There's the process of that flat pack coming together, if you like. And this is what it now looks like. That's actually CGI, apologies. These are what it actually looks like. And I can show you that beautiful view back over that lovely park and marina that I was telling you about earlier on. And we're not stopping. We have got a few more sites of houses to create and Mansion House, and we're creating more green space. So here you've got a residence garden, and we're also creating a communal garden for the public as well, just a row back from the marina, so that we are really continuing to create more of those green spaces. We're also about to announce more commercial uses on the ground floor of Mansion House, which will bring more great cafes and bars and that whole kind of marina living. Sorry, am I done? Sorry.
No, a minute to go.
Sorry, thank you. Sorry, I didn't hear you. That will bring open up more of the marina, so that people can sit and just enjoy that whole cafe culture lifestyle that's being created here. There's also an emerging sort of testimony of the economics of the area. When we started selling those first houses, we were averaging £250,000, £300,000 for a family home. Of the very few people who have sold on their homes, they are achieving much higher resales than that. So it shows that the area is really generating value. And this slide, just to conclude, just shows you in numbers what's being achieved. A third of the site is affordable. We've got lots of social rent, shared ownership, just a great whole mixed community in which hundreds of people now live, work and play, and have a great time doing so. So thank you for listening to that. I felt I rushed that. I hope you heard everything, but any questions, please ask.
It was spot on timing as well, Leanne. So well done. You managed to cram an awful lot into your 10 minutes. So lots of food for thought for the judges. I'm going to come to Pete first. If I can invite our judges to switch their cameras back on, so we can see for the conversation. And Pete, I'm going to come over to you.
Okay, well, I'm going to keep it short because I've got a fear that I might just become the fanboy on the judging panel. If so, so I'm the judge who's been to site obviously, and I've not just been to site, and I don't just know Leanne and Hazel and everybody else, but I've been to site because it's where my favourite bakery is, and so I'm a little bit biased, so I'll try and not project any bias. There's 1,000,001 questions you could ask here, so I'm going to ask the really obvious one by getting in first, which is there anything that you would do differently if you did it again, and which bit are you most proud of? That's 2 questions.
That's fine, Pete. Nice to see you. Thank you for those. I think that what's been really interesting at New Islington is we have learned and we have adapted development as we've gone along. In the presentation, you'll see drawings of the first iteration of New Islington, where it was a completely different housing typology that was supposed to front the canal. We, post-recession, learned that that wasn't going to work. It wasn't the right housing type for a number of reasons. So we evolved the master plan. So we've already learned, we've already changed things. And similarly with the house product, you'll notice the first iteration of it was that grey clad typology, and we've moved that on to just make some design tweaks, including clad product, just because the customers responded better to that aesthetic. So I think we'd never be arrogant to say nothing, we wouldn't change anything, because we have already changed things. And in terms of what we're most proud of, I think I would speak for everybody in the business when I'd say that ability to keep that family traditional person who's going to move out into Didsbury and knock a terrace through in Manchester city centre. And we have worked absolutely tirelessly to give them what they want on that doorstep: a school, a park, a nursery, just a place to live really well, especially this past year. One of the girls who lives at Percy Street had a baby last summer, and she's like a huge champion for it. She moved out to Monton in Salford because she thought she wanted the sort of suburban life. And she moved back into town, had a baby in a pandemic, but just says, this is the community for me as a mum of a small child. And to hear that, you go, oh my God, that was the original brief. That was what we're supposed to do, keep people in Manchester. And that's been achieved because the other stuff was put there first. It wasn't, here's some houses, let's profit, then let's see what we can retrospectively add. It was done as part of the process, and it's still being done as part of the process. And I think that has never been more compounded than in the past year, the importance of that and true place. Sorry, that was a long answer, Pete.
Good, thank you.
No, that was a good, thorough, passionate answer. That's what we like to see. Maja, I'm going to come over to you next, please.
Thank you, Emma. And what a great presentation, Leanne. Every time I thought, oh, maybe I'll ask about this. You covered so much. But I guess I wanted to maybe hear a little bit more about what different ways the community was involved in the process, like what that looked like maybe, and whether kind of anything came out of that. Were there any kind of clashes between, I know you spoke about the community that originally lived there and the new people that were we're going to be the new residents, whether their visions or their needs and your own kind of design ideas. How did you kind of put all of that together into the final kind of design, which is really, really impressive. So wanted to hear more about that.
Thank you. There's some really cool videos online, and you could fall down a rabbit hole on YouTube later today if you're not sick of your screen, of our former chief executive Nick Johnson, who's the guy behind Maier, Altrincham Market, very sort of well-known man in Manchester. He led that process and met with the original residents, and there are some hilarious old videos of people just shouting at each other, but in a really positive, productive way. So you've got Nick Johnson, Tom Bloxham, both of Urban Splash, you've got the architect Will Allsop, and they're in this old pub which was called the Cob and Coal at New Islington, and all just like shouting about what they wanted. This woman wanted a pink kitchen, it was a pink kitchen, and they were all just shouting design ideas and, is this going to happen? And so that kind of beautiful piece of history was just really cool, because you've got sort of really cool architects and then this passionate, like the most passionate group of people you've ever seen in the original community, all wanting the same thing but just finding a way to talk together in the same language about how they wanted it. So that process, sorry, I've lost my point. That process, there's videos that exist of that public consultation. That was the very first sort of journey with the existing community, and from that the designs were then worked up with with Far and Demetz and the various rows of houses that those people stayed and have still stayed in now. And then as we evolved through to the mid 2015, 2016, and the shedkm designed house product came in, that the first row of those were all designed to customer specification. So customers actually fed into their own blueprint and were able to choose, you know, whether they wanted bedrooms upstairs, downstairs, garden living, loft living. So they actually put their own stamp. So that customer choice has actually been proven and existed throughout the whole process, really. I'm sure we could have done more. I'm sure there was so much more consultation you could do, and I'm sure there's more we could still do. And it's a learning as we take this New Islington blueprint to other communities around the country, which we are doing already. There are learnings being fed in, but I think ultimately we're really proud of the fact that people living in this neighbourhood have been asked throughout and continue to be asked, and it's something we're quite proud of. And the fact that so many people live there and still live there, having lived there for a long time, is probably the testament to it. Has that answered you? Sorry.
Absolutely, yeah, that sounds really amazing, and I'll be checking out the video. But like you say, it can be kind of a never-ending process, so it's so great that you've kept up that conversation.
It's also funny to see how people have aged, who people in the development world might know from Urban Splash. So, you know, just go and have a giggle, me included.
Thank you very much. We've got about a minute, so if you've got a sort of a 10-second question, and you've got a 50-second answer, Leanne, then we can squeeze a last one in.
Very quickly then, it's such a huge, amazing project. It's hard to know where to start, to be honest with you. But very quickly, what part of the project has had the biggest single impact on the community, and why? I think I know the answer to this, but...
Oh my gosh. Right. How long? We've got 20 seconds. I think I couldn't point at one thing. I think those first houses and giving that an original community the love and investment that was needed and deserved was a huge achievement. I'd say the school has a massive impact because it has really harnessed, and it is a fantastic school. So it has given so many local children opportunity. And just the park, just if you sat in that park at Pete's favourite bakery, which is called Pollen, and literally probably the most award-winning bakery in the country, you will just see queues out the door and people just sat eating croissants on the marina with their toes dipping in, and you think, wow, that wasn't happening 15 years ago. That is amazing. You've brought people together in a lovely place. Sorry, I was fine.
Thank you so much. It's time to wrap up. I've got a feeling that Pollen is going to get a whole load of extra custom, as you know, at the very least the judging panel are all going to be queuing up outside for their croissants. Thank you very much indeed, Leanne, for such a thorough and passionate presentation and answers. We really appreciate you bringing it all to life for us. So now it's time for our final contender. Time is really flying. So we're off down south now, off to Brighton, to Circus Street. This development was inspired by its community and its location. It's a mixed-use development by regeneration. It transforms a derelict area that previously housed a fruit and veg market into a new bespoke quarter. So really pleased to welcome our presenters, Hazel Rounding from shedkm and Rob Sloper from UNI. So over to you guys. We look forward to hearing from you.
Thanks, Emma, and thanks, Leanne, for the credits in the last presentation as well. Great to be here today, and really good company from everything that was being shared this morning. Just get my file open. Can we see that okay? Yeah,
yeah,
great.
looking good, yeah.
Okay, so Rob Sloper from UNI is going to chip into the presentation as well. And just to really say, we've worked collaboratively now for 10 years on Circus Street. Real challenge, and a public-private investment partnership was formed on the old municipal market site in Brighton, which is the area with the big shed on the plan there. And really fascinating site because it's bordered by social housing. There's a 7.5 metre change of level on the site. It's behind a listed terrace within a conservation area and very close to the Brighton Pavilion. So lots of really important context to that. The market building had been empty for about 10 years, and it's been about 10 years now since we started looking at the site. So a 20-year project from the redundancy of the former market building, working alongside existing community and the conservation area, as I said. Rob, do you want to pick up?
Yeah, it's pretty worth, as you say, 10 years derelict before we put a spade in the ground, and 10 years of our relationship still going strong, Hazel. So what was really unique about this was, despite its central location, it was on the side of the town that really saw limited benefits of Brighton's wider growth. And Grand Parade, which leads down to the pier, was almost this divide for progression between east and west. The area itself was actually one of the most deprived wards in Brighton. And that was when we were selected by the council to partner with them. And it was all about bringing beneficial change to start to turn around the negative perceptions, which it's often those perceptions that stand in the way of unaided recovery and growth. And we were there to kickstart. Can you go to the next slide, Hazel? And probably before anything else, we started with a program of events, which at the time was the largest that you and I had done to date. And we simply cleaned up the building, and we hosted everything from fashion shows to dance events, gardening workshops, arts installations, the list went on. And we had about 100,000 people through the doors coming into that existing building. And that exercise was all about giving a taste of what it could be and starting to change perceptions of the site. And it's that change that builds those bridges of trust. And suddenly it became no longer a conversation of what people didn't want, and it started to become a conversation about what they do want. And you can see at the centre of that slide, this image that shedkm produced this beautiful model from reclaimed timber from the on-site recycling centre. And that became this centrepiece for discussion about the emerging vision. Next slide, thanks, Hazel. And this was, for us, getting the right mix of uses is often the biggest challenge to create that place. You get it wrong, and you're not going to make the step change desired. And there was absolutely no off-the-shelf solution on this one. The council wanted to address a multiple of pressing needs in the city, from a chronic housing shortage, office space to attract and retain businesses, job creation, student accommodation to support their largest employer, freeing up HMOs, and a new cultural centre to create that draw to east of Brighton, and ultimately to kickstart the ripple effect of regeneration in a pretty rundown area. And then it was then for Hazel and the team to take that very complicated site and brief and create something special, something of Brighton and welcoming.
Thanks, Rob. So there was an architectural competition, and I think taking that brief resulted in quite a lot of big buildings that we took a totally different approach and tried to understand Brighton. And I think the brief was clear from the start that this project was to be about growing Brighton. It wasn't to be about a project imposed on Brighton. So the first part was really understanding the grain of the city. We produced that model that you just saw on the last page, really working with the university students next door with reclaimed timber from the beach, and just tried to get into what Brighton was all about. The maps here show the lanes and the growth of Brighton over time, the parcels of land, and we really wanted to understand the typologies that exist there, because they're not big footprint buildings, they're small buildings, and what's the history behind that, and what are the routes that used to exist across this site. So this really very much became about the patchwork of Brighton as we go forward. We wanted to think about each of those stakeholders with the accommodation of the dance building, the office, the students, the residential, and giving them a balance across the site, giving them all their own buildings, all their own cores, not having shared big building plots. And so it resulted in this plan, really, which was a balance of buildings and landscape, creating spaces between buildings that were of Brighton, not big, huge squares, but the kind of reference to the lanes and the opening up of alleyways into areas of public use, and creating a really permeable site and use across it, and also respecting the neighbours as well, but dealing with that 7.5 metre change of level. So ultimately a real balance of the site, and you can see there a cluster of students, a residential cluster as well, the dance and the office. We've marked there the university building. That's the only one that's not delivered as this first phase of works. but each of those buildings contributing to the square at the heart of the scheme. Then we wanted to understand the materiality of Brighton as well, and it's such an eclectic place, and there's such a mix of buildings that have developed since the Regency style. Number of listed buildings in the area as well that I spoke about earlier. So these are some of the very early planning drawings where we looked at how we could create this high density on the site without going big buildings really tall. Sitting into the valley itself, as you can see on the top section there, but choosing a materiality where each of the stakeholders, each of the type of buildings, students, resi, office, dance, all have their own materiality, but they sit within a palette and an overall composition. And that was really important to us, that the buildings sat collectively amongst the landscape. So just one by one, you can start to see some of the delivered photographs here. So nearing completion on the majority, but really starting to get a balance of townscape, streetscape, and understanding the granularity of the site as well, and the landscape and textured materials. So the residential is formed from 4 buildings sat around a courtyard, but each of those buildings reads as an individual townhouse. So a tall vertical townhouse reads as a small building plot coming down to ground, and very much about sitting within the townscape, within the pitches, slightly fun, you could say, on the townscape there, which is what Brighton's all about as well. But large windows, really good residential use, dual aspect units, and creating the spaces around them and becoming a real family in that townscape. 114 apartments, 28 affordable, and the sustainability, a very big part of the scheme as well. The students, green roof systems, photovoltaic panels, really hitting the BREEAM excellent across the site as well. So as I said, another cluster of buildings in the students, sitting there amongst the woodland edge, as we called it. These are the buildings that sit closest to the social housing as well, and they incorporate a tower that lands itself on the square. And the tower, when I call it a tower, it's a 13-storey. It's quite a landmark in Brighton, but working with the conservation, we found a couple of strategic points where taller buildings would not impact the skyline and the views through to the pavilion, but would rather contribute to drawing people to the place. And then the dance building, I think there was huge pressure right from the start to put the dance into the base of one of the buildings, but collectively, shedkm and you and I hung on to the fact that the dance building was the real gem at the heart of the site. It deserved its own building. It had the community use at the ground floor. We sited it right on the square, so the community dance, the dance studio itself has really tall glazed sliding doors which will open it up onto the square, create performances. Limited budget, limited development appraisal, but we found a real way to give it a gem. Thank you. And so the corkscrew is a real contribution to the iconic structures on the site. The office building, again, anchors the overall development. You can see on the CGI there as well that it contributes to the meanwhile use on the side of the site where the university would be, but a different offer for Brighton in terms of the aesthetic inside. And I suppose collectively then, just to bring it to a finale, you can see the buildings that sit there, the yellow being the landscape that knits the whole site together. The overall composition is very much a balance between the townscape that I've spoken about, the streetscape, which knits the overall quarter of Brighton together, and contributes. I think the final picture on the bottom right hand side there is the back of the listed terrace that I spoke about, and lots of those units have come into use, and it feels like a street that's always been in Brighton in terms of Circus Street, so embedding itself into Brighton. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hazel and Rob. Thank you for that. Lots to talk about. I love that use at the beginning of the building to reframe people's thinking about the space, and just to get them bought in and involved in thinking about what they wanted, not just what they didn't want. Really, really fantastic. I'm going to bring Phil in first. Phil's had the opportunity to visit, so I'm sure he's got a couple of questions for you.
Thanks, Emma. Hi, Hazel, Rob. Thanks for the presentation. I went down to site last Monday on a nice sunny day. It was great to have an excuse to go down to Brighton for the first time in a few years, actually. So, and you know, it's a cracking scheme. I mean, there's a lot going on a tight site, and I've got to say it's really well executed. Hazel, you guys have done a great job in introducing a variety of architecture, using materials really well to bring a real variety to the space. And I think also it's just got, I mean, it's not complete yet. Some of the retail units are still empty, but I can imagine the buzz I think I was sat having a coffee in, is it Circus Street, between two of the buildings. And I didn't really feel overlooked, weirdly, and there was no retail in front of me. I sat quite comfortably for 20 minutes and there's these buildings kind of towering either side of you. So whatever you've done it quite well. Well, very well, in fact. But yeah, just a quick question. Just you talk about the community consultation at the very outset. I was just interested to hear of any kind of takeaways from that community consultation that impacted the design and maybe kind of influenced the design.
Yeah, shall I go first, Hazel? Or?
Yeah, go. Yeah.
I mean, a lot of ground was covered in those consultations. I'd say the most challenging, probably, part of the consultation was the relationship with the social housing to the rear. As you probably saw, Phil, the relationship between the buildings, it is tight, it is dense. And it's about working with them to get them brought in, because the residents there had these beautiful views across Brighton prior. They had a low-rise shed, and it was about showing them how they could benefit from that. So one of the big steps was start to go outside the red line, and suddenly we started to creep. And that's the benefit working in partnership with the local authority. You can suddenly start ignoring where your red line finishes. So I think the big change was the upgrading to the green space around those adjoining residents. So not within the site, there's obviously good examples, but there we've upgraded that space, and then the tenants of the Circus Street scheme will then fund the upkeep of those landscape spaces for the benefit of those adjoining residents, so they can feel that they not only got the benefit of the retail space, the workspace, the dance space, the community areas, but actually immediately outside their door, it's suddenly a safer place to go.
Good. Thank you. And I do look forward to going back actually and sitting in the square and having a coffee next time, because it looks as if it'd be a great space. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Emma, you're on mute.
Apologies, I'm gesticulating away excitedly, and thanks very much for those reflections from actually visiting. It's always good to get that sense of your experience as a citizen. So I'm going to take us next to Pete, please, if you could join us with any reflections and one or two questions.
Yeah, well, thanks to Hazel's map reading, I did find it when I was down in Brighton it's probably 2 years ago now, but it feels like sooner. But I didn't get the benefit of the site being sort of near complete, so it was kind of nice to see the photographs, but also to get Phil's feedback. I'm quite interested to ask, and it might be a question you can't answer really, about the proximity of the students and the residents, and how you've managed that interface, which is, we all know, is quite tricky in some circumstances, but yeah, it's quite a brave thing to do. And have you got any evidence as to how they're getting on with each other?
Shall I just pick up on it in a physical way, and then I think Rob could probably input. I mean, that's where we really used the site levels quite a lot as well, and all credit to J.L. Gibbons, who I meant to mention earlier than this, as the landscape architects worked really hard with us right from the start to ensure that those linear pieces of space that exist, the woodland edge, the courtyard, they all contribute. And work with the levels to help some of the overlooking in the section. So that was a big part of making the ground plane work. Rob, do you want to pick up on the feedback proximities?
Yeah, and also worth mentioning the inclusion of the oriel windows as well, with those manifestations to reduce that overlooking worked quite effectively. I think we all, when we were designing it with a very tight brief, it was almost a kind of a sharp intake of breath. Is this really going to work? And shedkm had this conviction, and I think it was only when the scaffold came down we all went, it works. The relationship between the buildings and the heights. And as we sit here today, so the student is fully occupied, completed over years ago, was the very first phase to come off. The residential is now about 50% complete. And as I sit here today and I'll find some wood to touch, we aren't dealing with any issues. There's no issues raised between the overlooking at the moment, which is a really positive thing. I spend more of my time dealing with complaints about dogs fouling in the wild flower meadow, which is self-seeding at the moment. So long may it continue that we're not getting that. With the existing residents, the social rented tenants, the other side of the student, that has been a very challenging relationship to maintain, and only managed just through constant conversations and communication to get them understanding of what we're doing and getting the management regimes in for the students as well.
And I do think it's important to add that it's not been an easy process in terms of such a high density brief, which was about Brighton growing and the council's requirements, sitting in that context, and us being absolutely adamant that this wasn't a site for really megalomaniac tall buildings. It did spend a year in the planning system. It spent a year in discussion with BRE in terms of rights of lights and everything else, but we really felt that the composition that we've achieved was really worth hanging on to, and it was the right placemaking solution for this site.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Maja, time to bring you in and get your burning questions answered.
Thank you, and thank you for a great presentation, Hazel and Rob. It's a really impressive project, and lovely to see those palettes that you were talking about working so well with the existing fabric in Brighton. I guess I wanted to ask you maybe, to close a more general question of what was your biggest challenge and what are you the most proud of on this project?
I mean, I would say the biggest challenge was, despite the council being half of our client team, the challenge of planning was huge. I mean, Brighton, I think, are obviously quite protective of the city, and this, even though they'd written the brief for this, it was a real challenge to put the accommodation on the site. So I think that year in the planning system really was quite challenging. I mean, we went back to committee on the materiality, so everything was done in collaboration. And it was a very unusual project, but very worthwhile, and all the principles worth hanging on to. I think the most rewarding part for me is actually turning the corner on Circus Street now and feeling as if it is of Brighton, and that street has always been like that, and we haven't forced it on Brighton at all, and it's grown from it and it's embedded in it.
Yeah, I would add, I think the biggest challenge was the dealing with this. It was a landmark scheme for Brighton at the time. Landmark didn't, as a word in Brighton, they didn't support height. There was a lot of challenge with the various conservation societies, and we received a lovely note the other day we got a lot of resistance from a couple of people, conservation societies, and we had a lovely note saying they went to the space, they stood in it, and they really liked it. And then you start to really feel proud of what you've done. You had that, it was a very bold vision, and then to have the most cynical about it come in and say, hey, it actually works. We like this, we like the materiality, the density actually fits in this location, rather than hiding unashamedly behind the roof lines, we can peek out, and that's okay. That's the right thing to do. Best thing for me is probably, I look forward to the moment of standing in that central square by our champion elm tree with the dance, the retail, the residential, the student, the office, and everyone piling out onto one square.
Amazing, thank you.
Thank you so much. The clock has been ticking away, and our time sadly has run out. But we've covered a lot of ground, and just a fantastic scheme. Really interesting. I'm certainly going to go and see whether I can have a look as well. So thank you very much indeed to Hazel and Rob, and thank you to all of our presenters from this morning, and of course to our judging panel and your audience members as well. Lovely to see that applause going across the screen. Thank you for that. So I'm now going to be taking the judges away to a quiet room so that they can take a deep breath and deliberate, debate, and of course decide on the winner. They're going to be keeping the decision absolutely top secret until Friday, and on Friday afternoon around 3 is the award ceremony when we'll get to find out who's won that golden pineapple. For our audience, you can now enjoy the lunchtime talk with Bernard Hay at 1 o'clock, which is on adding up the value of design. So please do go and take part in that. Promises to be a really good session. And between sessions, as before, if you wish to, do feel free to go and join a table in the social lounge. You can have the opportunity then to sit down with some of the other audience members, panelists, others who have been involved today, so that you can make some more of those connections. So thank you very much indeed to everybody for their participation. I hope everyone's enjoyed it as much as I have, and I hope you enjoy your afternoon ahead. Thank you very much.